Look, I'm going to run through this. I'm going to do this in just a few minutes because I want you to know what happened. You know those solar panels, you love them, don't you? Oh, I tell you what, they were really done well, but I think they tell a story even more important than that. They're an eyesore. Everybody agrees. They can be seen across the valley. I've been up in Shangri-La homes in the backyards. I can see them. I can see them from certain parts of North Oaks, and I think that they definitely will decrease some of the property values in some of the homes because of it. You know, they told us that they did this by looking out for the residents' best interests, but I don't believe it, and I don't think the residents do either. So on June 28th, remember, we're talking about something that's occurred for 2 years now, that on June 28th in 2017, we had an article that told us that officials at the State Housing and Community Development, HUD, or HED, having been contacted because they were the ones that supposedly permitted this, that there was no appeal mechanism for their permit process. That their God, once they've made a decision, they've made a decision. Then their spokesperson, who is the head of communications and tribal liaison, I love that title, was quoted as saying, they consider the local city and county ordinances that would be applicable, and based on their consideration of local zoning laws, the project would not have been stopped. She went on to say there was no basis for us to say no or deny that permit. They evaluate the safety of the project as well as any regulations in the city or the county have in place before they issue it. She lied. They never looked at it. And I'll show you that here in just a minute. There was another article. In that article, they said, well, the city sent inspectors up to the area. And the inspector says, oh, you know what? They verified that all the necessary permits were in place. But you know what? They didn't even know whose land they were on, okay, at the time. So we had complaints from all around the city, some from the residents right there in the community, some from other residents. And the city position was that permitting of solar panels in manufactured home parks was the responsibility of the state. They had no say in what went on. They talked about this all the time as if they knew what they were talking about. And in fact, Councilman Keller turned around and said, I'm going to send a letter to the state, to Acosta, and they lamented about the fact that the process didn't provide anything which allowed them to have any say in the matter. Well, I got to tell you what, I was curious, so I just took 5 minutes. I mean, I found this out in 5 minutes. I went to the HCD's website, to their mobile home and special occupancy plan review booklet. I mean, it tells you what you have to do to get a permit. On page 2, which is the checklist, item 1, so you didn't have to read very far, it said, item 1 said that they needed to get approval and a signature from the local planning department on the agency approval form or equivalent document. So I went back and I inquired with the city. I went down to City Hall at a council meeting and I said, City Hall, guys, tell me, which city employee signed off on this permit? I did it at the September 12th, 2017 City Council meeting. And Mr. Striplin said, we did not approve the project. In addition, the city was not aware of the HCD booklet requirements. So Council Member Marsha McLean asked staff to look into the matter. So how did they know they didn't have any say in the matter? They didn't know because they didn't check. So we started asking Tom Cole, hey, where is it? Do you have a copy of the permit? Do you even know who owns the land that they're on? And I asked him every time I saw him. He was, all he had to do was see me. He started answering questions, says we don't have the information yet. But finally, he got a copy of the HCD permit. And when you went to the section for local approval, guess what? It was blank. No one ever looked at it, right? So the next question that popped up was, are the solar panels installed within the entitlement of the mobile home park? So who has jurisdiction? Because if they're outside, then the city has jurisdiction. Well, it took almost a year for Tom Cole to come back to me because, again, I asked him every time I saw him, this was this thing, I walk up to Tom, he says, I don't know yet. That's the way it worked, right? And he revealed locating the Canyon View Estates County permit with the county, which said that when they applied for their conditional use permit, 50% of the property had to be maintained as open space, and that's why there were no mobile homes on that property. So the city filed a complaint. They went out and they sent their code enforcement officers out to the manufactured home park and talked to the owners. And of course, the owners just simply ignored them. So finally, the city filed a formal complaint in court, and it asked for a preliminary and a permanent injunction for relief to abate the public nuisance. And the city now alleges that the solar panels were installed without proper permits in violation of the Santa Clarita Municipal Code and in violation of the county's conditional use permit, which required 50% of the property be maintained as open space. So on January the 27th, 2019, about a year and a half after this whole thing started, the Signal reported that the trial date is now set for October the 21st, 2019. And currently, both sides are doing their due diligence. They're both doing discoveries. So on August the 9th, 2019, pretty recently, the defendants, the Canyon View Estate attorneys, are requesting to depose city manager Ken Striplin. In other words, they want to take a deposition. They want to ask him questions, pre-trial due diligence. Of special interest to them is the fact that Striplin, on October the 10th, 2017, told the city council, city staff, and the defendants that the city lacks the authority to issue solar panel permits. And so, they just, we don't have it. It's not our business, right? So now what the city legals are doing is they're claiming that the city manager is an apex level employee and lacks sufficient information to offer specific responsive testimony relative to the burden of him having to show up in the first place. Wait a minute. This is the city manager that every time we ask a question, the council has to go ask this guy because he knows everything. Now all of a sudden he knows nothing. Right? So what is an apex level employee? An apex is, according to the American Bar Association, it's a situation that of a doctrine that the lawyers all seem to prescribe to, that the opposing party of the deposition, in this case it's the city would have to say this, must generally show the witness, which is our city manager, lacks unique firsthand knowledge of the facts of the issue. And that other, less intrusive means of discovery, meaning going to lower level employees, have not been exhausted. So let me get this straight. Last week, we heard about the Financial Accountability and Audit Panel auditing the yearly information and finding money being spent without what they felt was the proper authorization. And when Mayor McLean was asked in the paper, by the paper, how they make these kind of decisions, she said, and I quote, "I'm assuming all this was looked at before the decision was made to go ahead to use the money." She went on to indicate, "When we receive information that an action is okay to take, we go by what staff says." So, remember, we had a challenge, said come down here and show us how the city budget works. Well, they don't know. Well, we knew they didn't know, right? But now they've said they don't know. They just do what staff says. It's okay? Yeah, we'll do it. Now that we know that the staff doesn't know, the legalese are telling us, well, the city manager doesn't know either. So who's minding the store for all this, right? I think it's just unbelievable, and my comments are censored because this is a family-friendly area where we don't use four-letter words here. So the problems, realize that this shows the way things have been working. Staff didn't research the permitting process in the first place, because if they would have researched the permitting process in the first place, they could have avoided this whole situation, but they didn't do it. So they failed to even go look at the HCD website. The council didn't question the staff's position. They just said, well, you guys said it, must be true, so we're just going to go and follow it along. The city building inspector goes up and says, oh yeah, they have all the required permits, without even knowing whose land it was on. And the HCD spokesman comes and makes claims about our local ordinances which are inaccurate, which says that, you know what, this couldn't be a better example of governmental agencies not doing their job and just shooting from the hip.